So we know the market has crashed. We know lenders have reduced loan to values, or some lenders have pulled completely from the market. So raising private finance is more important than ever. So in this video, I'm going to talk to you about raising funds through joint ventures and fixed rate returns from private investors. What's going on, guys? Dan Trevidi here. Hope you're all well. As ever, if you can do me a massive favor and smash the like button, and don't forget to hit subscribe and a little icon next to it. So raising funds from private investors and private individuals is going to be more apparent than ever, given the recent set of circumstances and the amount of changes from existing lenders or lenders who have pulled from the market. I'm going to break it down into two sections. First, joint venture funding, and second, which is fixed rate returns or loans from private individuals. In each section, I'm going to give you my experience in both the types of projects that are funded using both equity and debt. Equity being the joint venture model and debt being the fixed rate of return. I'm going to give you some insight into how I structured things and how it evolved over time through my learning and working with FCA compliant individuals and having lawyers write up different contracts that evolved after taking advice, and also the structure from a tax point of view was really important. So let's get started with joint ventures. For me, joint venture funding was absolutely one of the key things that helped me go from an individual who was struggling to get on in property, using my own small pot of cash, buying and trying to recycle it, but losing deals left, right and center. When I started working with investors, it definitely helped me to scale things up quite quickly and ramp things up and eventually branch into other things. And it was later on that I started working with investors for fixed rate of returns. In my experience, there's no right or wrong way of using one or the other. It actually is more about the type of project and the type of structure that you're going for, where the type of funding is actually more relevant. I remember one of my first joint ventures, I was buying a property with my own cash, and then another one came across which I couldn't buy, and I would normally have to let it go. But I've been doing some research and I've been doing some networking, and everyone was talking about this thing called joint ventures. And first of all, I definitely didn't want to do it. I didn't want to share what I was doing. I didn't want to share the profit, share my knowledge, or give away any insights into what I was doing. I thought it was like a hidden secret. But eventually I met a guy, he wanted to do a joint venture with me for my experience with property and student accommodation. And really I had to do it to buy this deal, which was a really good deal. At the time I was working, so I didn't have a huge amount of spare time, and I definitely had my way of working, which was quite lean and quite efficient. I definitely didn't want to spend more time than what was required. So I set the scene really early on. I sat down with the chap and I said, look, we need to get it all drafted up in a contract. You're putting the funds in, I'm managing the whole project. This is what we're going to spend here, this is what we're going to do here, and this is when I expect to have it rented, this is when we're going to recycle the funds out, and this is what sort of return I think we're going to get. To make my life easier, set everything out in black and white, and I also under-egged expected rental income and the return, and I overestimated the costs, because I didn't want to find myself in a position where I didn't have enough funds to do what I wanted to do by over-egging a budget and under-promising on the return. And that later set the scene and the key principles of future joint ventures, because what I didn't realize is what I was doing to make my life easier was actually the secure foundation for future projects. And that project went really well. We ended up renting it, I think, within like 10 days of the refurb finishing. I rented it for more than what I was expecting, way more than what I was advising the investor. So the return on investment was a lot stronger. So he was really happy. The budget was pretty much there on what I estimated. So we didn't have any overspends and we didn't have any massively underspends. So that was all in line with expectation. And we managed to refinance that property, I think 9 to 12 months later. So we were able to recycle most of the cash out, and we didn't expect to refinance all of it. So it all sat and stuck within the expectation between me and the investor. One went really well, and we ended up buying another 7 or 8 projects together. And that is the real success of joint ventures. If you get it right from the start and you set the scene and you get everything documented and you manage the expectations, then it can lead on to more in the future. Every joint venture will be successful. Sometimes you'll buy at a point in the market and the market turns, or the target market, whether you're looking to sell or looking to rent, that something might happen within that market which doesn't enable you to deliver the returns. Or you may have overruns or huge overspends Anything can happen in property. It's not clear, black and white, defined investment. Always moving, forever changing. Things can change and things do change and things do go wrong. I did an article a few years ago in the YPN about stopping a deal from going bad when things go wrong. And one of the key things is setting the scene out from day one, having everything documented in a joint venture agreement. I'm not talking about back of a fag packet or one that you can download from the internet or one you get from a group on Facebook. I'm talking about a specific drafted contract from a lawyer, which is created off the back of a set of heads of terms that you've agreed between you and the joint venture partner. So everything that you want is put into a legal document. And there's so many different ways you can structure it. You set up an SPV, that's a special purpose vehicle, or a company to buy the property in, and you both are directors and you both are equal shareholders within that company. As things evolve and you look to save money in terms of tax and for different structures, for different types of projects, you can have companies owning shares in a company and the company then buys the property. That, I think, is one of the most secure structures. There's little things about interpretations of tax and things like that where it clears all of that up. So companies own 50% of a company. To do the joint venture, I think, is one of the best structures. Now, as we bought more, when we were buying different types of projects and we were working with different types of investors from all over the world in different corporate entities, we were constantly having our documentation worked on, reviewed, changed by different lawyers. We went from a property lawyer to a commercial lawyer to an FCA specialist to a lawyer who writes policy for crowdfunding platforms. We've been through it all, and it's cost a bit of money. But one of the key things that we stuck to, which definitely helped us in terms of a compliance point of view, was we always had one investor with one deal. We never brought in two different investors for one deal, which we later found out was called pool and funds, which is something we've never done. So we always had one project with one investor, and that's kind of how we liked it. But one of the main reasons I started doing joint ventures and not just sourcing a deal and selling it on is because I wanted to build wealth. I wanted to build a legacy. I wanted to be involved in the project. But I didn't really quite understand people who were selling deals. So they find a great deal, if they found a great deal, and then they charge like a $5,000 fee, when a project can be worth so much more than that, not just in terms of finances, in terms of profit, but also in terms of learning and growing as a property investor. So one of the things I used to always say to anyone I was talking to about a joint venture was, yes, okay, we find the property, you put the funds in, but we do actually share everything 50-50. So if in 6 months' time a boiler breaks down, that cost is shared equally, and we tend to take out the profit from the rental income. When the property is sold, your investment is paid back in full, and we then share the profit with you equally, 50-50. Because our commercial interest was always aligned to the investors, so we only earn a profit when the investor earned a return, that meant we were both going in the same direction. We both wanted to reduce costs, we both wanted to maximize income. And with that, no one gets paid up front, no one gets to sell a deal and ride off into the sunset. The interests are aligned. And for me, that is why joint ventures, when done properly, are so good. Okay, so the second thing is debt. When I say debt or fixed rate of returns, it's because it's not aligned to the performance of the property. There is no ownership over the property. There may be charges, there may be interest, but there's no ownership. Whereas equity, after the debts are paid back or the investments are paid back, the equity is what you jointly own. Now, I really like joint ventures, and I think joint ventures are great for projects where people understand the risk and are happy to jump in on the risk. Debt is definitely something where the transaction between investor and developer is far more simple. It's very much fixed. That's the idea. It's a fixed rate of return. There is a start date, there is an end date, and there is an amount of interest. And no matter what market fluctuations, no matter what overspends, no matter how successful or how unsuccessful projects are, the investor gets their return. From a developer's point of view, if I'm going to take a huge risky project, then I'd much rather give a fixed rate of return, because if I've got it wrong or something happens within that market, the investor won't lose. They still get their funds and they still get their fixed rate of return. Whereas if it's a joint venture, yes, the returns can fluctuate. So from an investor's point of view, it's far less riskier. From a developer's point of view, if you get it wrong, you've got that cost, and that cost could probably wipe out your margin. If you get it right and you make more money, then you actually keep the lion's share of the profit because you're just paying that fixed rate of return. For me, the time period is important. I think a maximum term of 12 months is where it's at, but the interest rate is prorated. So if you can pay those funds back earlier, then the interest is reflected. So let's say if you're giving someone a 10, 12, 15% return on their funds per annum, but you pay it back in 6 months, then you only pay 6 months worth of interest. So the rate is fixed, but it's not fixed no matter what the time period is. So that means that you're working as a developer to try and get your project flipped over so you can pay those funds back. And equally, if the investor is getting their funds paid back earlier, they're happier because they can always put it into another project. But be prepared for when things do go wrong and you can't pay it back within that time frame. There needs to be triggers that are put in place that are documented that incentivize you to pay it back early, but also protect the investor should you not. And I think everyone will be more than happy with that. I do have a return on investment calculator within the Grace Charles app. It's free to download. I'll put a link in the comments, but it's a great little app. There's also a stamp duty calculator, mortgage calculator, and a return on investment calculator on there as well. In terms of documentation, always get a lawyer. I like single joint venture agreements. That's kind of a mixture between a joint venture agreement and a shareholders agreement. But when you're working with an investor for a fixed rate of return or debt, I find a simple loan agreement drafted by a lawyer is just as good. So that's really it from me, guys. A nice, simple, light-hearted video, a little bit away from the coronavirus and the lockdown and the market crash, but staying with the principle that we are going to have to all seek alternative methods to raising funds. Make sure you do it legally, make sure you do it compliantly. Always get everything set out at the beginning in an agreement. A friend of mine, John Corey, who I recently did a live event with, has several courses on this and various webinars. Check his page out on Facebook. Stay safe. Hope you found the content rich. Don't forget to hit the like button, and I'll see you all in the next video. Catch you later.